Equestrian is the second most expensive Olympic sport. Yachting is the first.
Welcome to the ladies of Tellico Village. My name is Joan Dorsey, and this show features interviews with some of the most fascinating and talented women living right here in Tellico Village. I know you'll enjoy today's remarkable lady. Her story is special, her life has been remarkable, and I feel so honored to have her here today to share it all with us. Sit back and enjoy this episode brought to you by the volunteers at Tellico Village Network. I'm Joan Dorsey, and this is the ladies of Tellico Village. And my guest today is another one of those amazing and fantastic ladies that lives right here in the village. She's had two very lengthy and wonderful careers. She's a medical doctor, and she's a gold medal equestrian. The medicine she chose was very interesting because she chose a type of medicine that gave her more time with the horses. My guest today is Donna Richardson. Donna, I'd like to welcome you. I loved interviewing you in your home because you have all kinds of wonderful memorabilia around that goes back to particularly your history with horses. I'm curious, you had such a passion about horses, you told me. When I asked you when is the first time you saw a horse, read about a horse, or rode a horse, you said you thought you were maybe 2 or 3 years old.
I really can't remember the first time I fell in love with horses, but it was at a very, very young age. Probably saw it in a book that my mother read to me. She was a big one on reading. And we had the Cleveland Mounted Police, and so whenever we went downtown, we'd look at the mounted police horses. And I couldn't understand why I couldn't have one.
And what was the plea you gave to your parents when you decided you really wanted a horse of your own?
Oh, what every kid says. Mommy, I'll take care of it myself. We can keep it in the garage.
As you got a little older, though, maybe in upper elementary or middle school, you really wanted to learn more about maybe riding horses. So how did that proceed at home?
Same old thing. I just begged and pleaded for riding lessons. If I couldn't have a pony of my own, well, maybe I could ride somebody else. Somebody could teach me how to ride.
So as you got older and you were old enough to ride a bus by yourself, your parents let you go to a place called Red Raider Camp and take lessons. There was kind of a deal with that too, which was pretty neat.
Yes, there was. Originally, I had to pay for my lessons like everybody else, but after a number of years, I got good enough that I could teach the little beginner riders on Saturday, all day Saturday, for my one private lesson on Sunday. And that's when I really started to advance in the sport.
This Emmy Grant, who was in charge of the camp, a word came up that I kind of associated with her. It was dressage. And I was under the impression, I knew that meant a very special kind of outfit and a special kind of way that they rode the horse, but I thought that was a very old term. Tell me a little bit about dressage.
Dressage is French for training, and it's a method of training a horse. Over the years, and I mean centuries, it has evolved into a sport. It was primarily practiced on the European continent, but it started to get popular here, in the early 1950s. And Emmy Grant was one of the founders of dressage in America.
You start out jumping, and that warmed you up for dressage, or fill me in on the sequence of that.
It really should be the other way around. We should really learn how to pilot a horse well without fences getting in the way. But every little kid in the world just wants to run out there in the countryside and jump over fences. The bigger the better. Emmy would come and make us train our horses, even our little school horses. They had to be something called on the bit, which means that they were listening to our hands and legs, and they would move sideways when we asked, and they would, with invisible aids, go into the walk, trot, and canter. And after torturing us and the poor little school horses with this for 45 minutes, she let us do what we really wanted to do, which was go run and jump.
And what was your favorite thing to do?
Oh, running and jumping. Until I realized that, like every other little kid, I wanted to make the Olympics, and I was never going to do it as a jumper rider. I didn't have that kind of talent. But it became apparent later on that I had a pretty good talent for this new stuff called dressage.
What's the most important thing for a child starting out to know Is there anything that's standard you have to tell them?
I think the most important thing you can tell a little kid that's starting out in riding is to have fun. You have to push them a little bit. You have to make sure they're safe, but it has to be fun. It can't be drudgery, routine, routine, routine. Little kids can't handle that.
So you pretty much did this through high school, and then it got to be college time. Yeah. Do you want to run through your training? Because I know you started out in microbiology at Ohio State. Run me through your series of preparations.
Well, originally I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. And then I came face to face with the fact that there's a lot of euthanasia involved. And I know myself well enough to know that if a dog has cancer or incredibly severe injuries, the kindest thing is to put them down. But if you have somebody who comes in with a dog with a broken leg and they can't afford to have that broken leg fixed, they want to have the dog put down, I would probably fix the broken leg. In 4 years, I'd have 200 dogs, 300 cats, heaven knows how many horses. So I decided instead we would go into another specialty where I didn't have to do that. Well, I had planned to be a surgeon, and I trained out here at the University of California at San Diego in surgery for a couple years. But then I realized that if somebody has appendicitis, you can't say, I can't help you this weekend because I have a very important horse show to attend. Take 3 aspirin and you'll be dead by the time I get back. There was a new specialty just evolving called emergency medicine. And it is not like it is on television where people are having sex in the closet. We're generally too tired for that. And I decided I would go do that. So I became one of the first board-certified emergency physicians in the United States.
Did you have to do another residency for that?
No, you do now. But in those days, you could just start practicing emergency medicine. And most of the people who went into it were surgeons. About 6 years after I started doing that, they started to offer a board exam, which meant that you had special competence in practice and in theory in emergency medicine. So I took it and I passed it. Now you have to take a residency to practice emergency medicine, just like internal medicine or pediatrics or OBGYN.
So you got established, and did you still ride horses when you could? Or were you too busy when you were in college really to do that?
Oh, I snuck in a few rides when I was in college and medical school. One of my plastic surgery professors had a horse his daughter couldn't ride, so I fixed it for him. Needless to say, I got a really good grade in plastic surgery.
So you finally were able to buy yourself a horse. Mm-hmm. And what was the horse's name?
Mouse. I found her in a pig pen. I purchased her for $400. She was all I could afford.
Normally when you buy a horse, are they as aware of their name as dogs are?
Not at all.
So sometimes that you do change the name.
It's considered bad luck to change a horse's name. Yeah.
I'm just curious, how many horses from that first horse, Mouse, to today, how many horses have you owned? Not all at once.
I think I stopped around 21 or so, stopped counting.
What's a no-no about buying a horse? What should you be most aware of? Particularly grandparents looking at horses for grandchild, or somebody like you that's a little more knowledgeable. Are there some real no-nos you should know?
Don't buy more horse than you can handle. Beginners frequently want to ride the Olympic type horses, and Olympic type horses, it's like driving a Volkswagen or driving a Lamborghini. You'd better be a better driver to get the most out of that Lamborghini and to stay safe. With a car, if you don't drive it properly, the car doesn't get frustrated. But a horse that's well trained, ridden by a beginner rider, is a disaster. The horse is unhappy, the rider gets unhappy, and it's not safe. So I would say the first thing to do is find a horse that makes you smile and a horse on which you feel safe.
So once you've known all you really need to know to ride and everything, and you want to broaden your skills, what do you have to know to go into judging?
It's a whole different skill set than riding. But you've been going through the levels, showing yourself, and you get comments, you get score sheets. And on those score sheets, the judge will tell you what you've done right and wrong. So even as a rider, you have a lot of exposure to what gets a 7, what gets a 6, what gets a 10, very rare, what gets a 2, you don't want those. But to actually become a judge, you have to be certified by the United States Equestrian Federation, and they have 3 different levels of certification. It takes about 15 years to get to the highest level.
I know you had a busy year. You judged 20 shows, you told me, from California to New York. That's a lot of traveling, and that's at your expense as a judge? Or do the shows pay their judges to come in?
You don't get rich being a judge, but they do cover your expenses, and they pay you a little bit per day for judging.
I know I asked you, how many horses do you have now? Obviously not the 21, but you have 3 horses. Allegra, Maximo, and Aristocrat. Do they all compete, or are some of them just horses you have? What is their purpose at this point?
Some of them are aiming at English dressage, which is ridden in an English saddle. And they are about a third of the way through their training to the upper levels, which is Grand Prix. One of them is aimed at Western dressage, which is a new sport. You do most of the movements from English dressage, only you do it in a Western saddle.
But they don't race barrels.
No.
What's your, I know you have a daily routine for these horses as you own them and train them. What's kind of their calendar for the week?
The horses usually work 4 days a week in dressage. They have 1 day a week where they do stretching, and they have 2 days a week that are off, because just like human beings, you can't keep hammering the same muscle again and again and again. Yes, you want to build up those muscles, but you have to give them a day to rest and repair.
Is there an actual set of exercises like when we exercise, when they stretch? Are they it's moves that you put them through?
Yeah, they're not doing yoga, but...
You've owned 21 horses. What would be one of the reasons you might have sold one of those horses?
Well, in the beginning, I was just fresh out of my internship and I didn't have a whole lot of money. So I bought the best horse I could find. And as the horse got better and my ambitions grew a little bit more, I sold that horse, and then I took the money, put it into a new, slightly better horse. Because as good a rider as you are, you can't be better than your horse. It's a partnership.
You do some teaching now.
Oh, I love it.
And how many students do you have?
Probably about 7 or 8.
Really? And how often do they come?
Anywhere from a couple times a week to once or twice a month.
And do you have any that are really, really promising?
Yes, I have 2. One is a little tiny thing, but she just went to the National Pony Club and she won the equitation championship there, which is a class in which not the horse is judged, but the rider, how she sits, how she uses her hands. And she beat a whole bunch of kids that are up to 13 years old. And she has what's called feel, and you can't teach that. She can feel what the horse is doing underneath her.
And she always rides this. Is that her horse, or does it's her horse?
She has a very cute little pony who is currently out of work because she's pregnant.
Oh, so she's little, but she's not young.
No, she's not young.
You know, when I was growing up, I had a couple of friends that had ponies, and they weren't very nice. Is it something in the breeding? Is that just a bad rumor that started that ponies have nasty dispositions?
Ponies do not have nasty dispositions. Ponies, well, any horse will do what they can get away with, just like kids. And if you are a small person and you're not able to discipline your pony, the pony is going to take more and more and more advantage. There are a few ponies, and they're called saints, that never take advantage of their children.
What would be an acceptable discipline for a pony that just couldn't be controlled in something particular that was happening?
Well, you have to have somebody bigger and stronger get on it and teach the pony that putting your head down and grabbing a mouthful of grass is not acceptable pony behavior. And it's not that you're mean or beat him up, it's just the pony's head goes down. The bigger, stronger person says, nope, with the rein, put your head up, kicks him in the belly. And pretty soon the pony says, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to do that. But then you have to teach the little kid how to do that too. Otherwise the pony's going to revert back to the behavior.
So it's a two-way street. I'm getting to now the best horse of all, whose name was, you tell me.
Jazzman.
Jazzman. And you purchased him in 1994. I'm just curious, what did it cost you to buy Jazzman?
$60,000.
What brought you to pay that and want Jazzman when you went shopping for the best horse ever?
At that point, I had set my sights on making the United States equestrian team. I needed a very special, very talented horse to do that. And even at the age of 3, you could see that this horse had a brilliant future ahead of him. Just in the way he carried himself, the way he moved, he was special.
When you
And
went to purchase, and you were, I take it it's like buying a car. You drive a couple cars and you buy the one you like that rides the best. How many horses did you ride before you, when you were looking for the most special horse you ever could find?
Zero.
Zero, the minute you...
I had sent Stefan Peters, who's one of my instructors at that time, who had already been on the Olympic team, and he was over in Europe. And I said, find me a horse that's around 5 years old, can do a single flying change, and can maybe do a little baby passage or piaffe. And so he sent me a videotape that had a whole bunch of those horses on it. And at the very end, there was Jasmine, who was 3 years old, and he was being ridden around in the ring, and then they took him outside, and my jaw just dropped when I saw him.
So you were looking at video.
Videotape. I had a broken leg at that time.
So you bought Jasmine...
Sight unseen.
Sight unseen.
Well, not sight unseen, but I talked to Stefan, and he said, well, yeah, he's a really nice horse. I said, is he crazy? He said, no, he's not crazy. He's just a young 3-year-old. I said, well, okay.
He had been with the original owner.
Yes.
You went to several events with Jasmine, and I remembered asking you about, do you drive across country pulling a horse trailer if you have to get somewhere? And I was surprised because I know for the derbies, they transport some of them by air. Tell me about that.
Most of the training that I did and showing was in the California, Arizona area, and we would just haul the horse by trailer. When I was trying out for the Pan American Games, the way you get there is qualify locally, and then the top 12 in the country are selected to fly back to Gladstone, New Jersey, and compete head-to-head. And the top 4 are selected to go to the Pan American Games.
So tell me about flying a horse.
You may have flown with a horse, especially if you've flown internationally. Sometimes they're flown in what's called combi carriers, where the front 2/3 of the plane just looks like a normal plane. But the back has a space where you can put animals. And to the horse, it's not that much different. You take them to the airport, way away from the terminal.
Yeah, I never saw them loading a horse in the plane.
That's a totally different area. And there's 3 horses, they call it a crate. And it looks to the horse just like a horse trailer. You lead them up into the crate. And at this point, you have to be in the crate with the horse, because with me, if my horse is flying, I'm going to be there with them. And they lift it up into the belly of the plane, and then they roll it forward on rollers, lock it down. So the horse doesn't actually have to walk up into the plane. To them, it's just kind of a strange trailer. And I'm sure they must think it's really strange when the plane takes off and when it lands.
So they're in like a horse trailer. Are they secured in any way? I mean, I put on a seatbelt when I get in an airplane. No seatbelts?
No, well, it's a little hard to put a seatbelt on a horse.
But there's nothing, not a horse version of something?
You have tranquilizers.
Oh, okay.
And if they start flipping out, it used to be you had to give them a shot. Now they have some you can just kind of put the drug on your finger and stick it in the mouth. And within about 5 minutes or so, they're feeling no pain. They're really having a good time on their airplane.
There's no chance they would be injured or anything then?
There's always a chance.
Always a chance. You kept Jasmine for 30 years. What motivated you not to sell Jasmine? As a gold medal winner, I'm sure the price would have gone up possibly quite a bit.
When he won the gold medal at the Pan American Games, I could have paid off my house in California with what I was offered for him. But that horse had made my dreams come true. He was the first level champion, the second level champion, the fourth level champion, the Prix St. George. He was champion at just about every level that there is, all the way up to Grand Prix. He got me on the team. He got me a gold medal. He was family.
You once compared for me in our interview, and I don't even know for sure what the comparison was now, but I have a note in my card that says you had compared horses to motorcycles. And I just remembered the comparison. What was that?
Horses aren't motorcycles. A lot of people think they can go buy a really fancy horse. And the horse has got all the training, but maybe the person doesn't have the training. If you don't know how to ride a motorcycle, you're probably going to crash unless you take a few lessons. And with a horse, if you buy a really expensive fancy horse, you better know how to operate the controls.
What is your greatest fear about horses you've owned or Jazzman? I mean, was there always something that kept you being extra cautious when riding, when traveling? What was your greatest fear?
With Jazz, I don't think I ever really had any. He could be naughty occasionally. He could be strong, but...
If it was naughty, what would he do?
Oh, he would kick at your leg or something like that. Actually, the only time he ever really hurt me, he had an injury that required him to walk. And it was New Year's Day, and normally I would have some of the people that work for me do the walking with him. Well, there was no one to walk him that day, so I walked him, and he was feeling really good. He jumped right up in the air, and he took his leg forward, and he kicked me in the ribs. He didn't mean to, I just happened to be in the way, but it did break 3 of my ribs in 2 different places and bloodied my lung.
When I interviewed you, you went through, I'd asked you about injuries, you went through a list. Can you just do part of that? I was amazed at the injuries you've had over the years.
And most of them were silly things. I mean, of all the injuries that I had, hardly any of them were from actually falling off a horse. I had a horse fall on me once and break my foot. I had another horse, when I was walking on, just walking it, and I was walking alongside another horse. He tripped, knocked me down, and broke my elbow. I was getting out of my trailer in a big hurry because the Super Bowl was on, and I was doing a show in Los Angeles. I wanted to get home in time to... I made a misstep as I hopped out of the back of the trailer, fell over and broke my wrist. So, yeah, I think I counted them. They were like 21 bones.
I didn't count, but I know you named quite a few. Expenses. When people buy a pony, we talked about that for a grandchild or for a young child. As somebody that's owned 21 horses, what do people need? What are the things people might not think of? Run me through a list of, if somebody said to you, what do I have to know before I buy this horse? Because I've never had a horse before, that shocks them when they...
The purchase price is just the start.
What comes next?
Well, monthly feed bills, monthly shoeing bills. There's always veterinary immunizations. They get sniffles just like everybody else and sometimes need to see the vet. There's show expenses, there's training expenses, there's expenses for the saddle and the bridle and the clothes. And if you have a kid, the kid grows out of the clothes quickly. So yeah, equestrian is the second most expensive Olympic sport. Yachting is the first.
Go through the attire. What kind of attire do you have to be properly dressed to do dressage?
Well, at a minimum, you need a pair of boots. They can either be tall boots, which is probably the most classical, or you're a little kid, if you grow out of your boots rather regularly, you can have short boots that only come up, say, here to the ankle. They're less expensive. You need a pair of riding pants, and you need a hard hat, so that if and when you do hit the ground, your head has some protection.
That fancy little velvet thing
It's not a fancy little velvet thing anymore.
That way. Oh.
When I was young, that's what it was. It was a fancy little velvet thing. But now it has evolved so that it's actually safety protection. They even have some out now that will help you if you have a rotation injury, as well as just a direct crash.
Don't they have special little jackets?
Yes, you have special little jackets. There are even inflatable vests that you plug into the saddle, so that if you happen to fall off, the inflatable vest blows up and it will take some of the impact of your chest. Dressage riders generally don't use those. The people who are galloping cross country do. The most embarrassing thing is if you hop off your horse at the end of a cross country course and you've had a really great ride and you forget to unplug it and you jump off your horse and the vest inflates.
Oh my goodness.
It's expensive to replace the vest too.
One of the things I have to always ask everybody, because like I said, people that live here always want to know, how did you find Tellico Village?
I had a friend who lived in Clinton, Tennessee, and she told me how wonderful it was to live in Tennessee. And I knew I couldn't stay in California because I needed a place with a less expensive standard of living. I wanted to have grass, trees, a nearby mountain, and some small interest in the dressage community. And so she told me about Knoxville, and I came to visit, and I decided I liked Knoxville the best. And I originally settled on the north side of Knoxville in Blaine. It turned out most of my students are in the neighborhood of Loudoun County. So rather than drive an hour a day, I just decided I'd move here, and I found out about Tellico Village that
And
way.
Blaine is where Jazzman passed. I remember you putting that down in very peacefully in the pasture, I believe. How do you handle the death of a horse?
A lot of tears. Jazz was 29 years old, which is very, very old for a horse. And he got through the winter, but he lost a lot of weight. And I was beginning to think, do I want him to go through another winter? And I had a 4-acre property, 2 acres for him, 2 acres for me for the house. And my neighbor called me. I was at a horse show that weekend and told me that he'd passed away. And it was a long trip back from Georgia. Cried the whole way. And when I got there, he was laying peaceful and no sign of a struggle. So whatever it was fast. He probably had an aneurysm or a cardiac event. And my next door neighbor was really sweet. He knew he was the one who was taking care of Jazz. He said, Donna, we'll take care of this for you. And the next morning, I hear a tractor, and he'd brought some of his friends over with a tractor, and we buried him on the property. I didn't watch.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed the tour of your house, first of all, seeing all your memorabilia, the figurines, and we should have brought in today, and I remember saying, no, let's wait. But you do have a figurine of Jazzman, and we're going to do some photography, but your house is just filled with all kinds of wonderful things from years and years of your devotion to horses. Just a wonderful story. I just can't thank you enough for sharing it with me.
Thank you very much. And if anyone wants to try dressage or learn more about it, feel free to call me.
I'd like to thank you all for watching. Be sure to join us for the next show. I'd like to thank the Tellico Village Network and all the volunteers. See you next time.